Thanks, Glenn, for that intro. So welcome everyone to the FME 101 webinar, which is really just a beginner's guide to FME Desktop. So what we're going to go through today is a brief overview of Safe Software's FME Desktop to highlight what it can do for you and your organization. So if you're a new user to Desktop, or maybe you're in need of a refresher of its basic capabilities, then you're in the right place. So the agenda for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to run through FME's capabilities. So what FME actually does, its common uses. There's going to be an intro into Desktop, so the various components of FME. Some short demos that we're going to run through on data translation, data reprojection, and some content restructuring. And then we're just going to wrap up with a question session. And really, we're going to inform you of any training opportunities and events that we've coming up here in IMGS. So FME capabilities. SAFE's main reason for producing this software is really to help translate data from one format into another. So that's true for both spatial data and non-spatial. Sometimes we can get a bit consumed with the spatial side. FME does also support non-spatial formats. So at its core, FME Desktop is a data translation tool. As of 2015, it supports in excess of 325 formats. So I think if you have a format that you need to use, you are going to be able to find it within FME Desktop. Incompatible data formats, they're really one of the huge barriers in being able to move data between different organizations and even different users within the same organization. So FME solves this challenge because it has this unparalleled format support that you can translate data between any of these 325 formats. So you can see from the graphic in the center here, FME started off with both CAD and GIS formats. So all your various AutoCAD and GIS formats such as TAB and SQL. We have XML databases, both spatial and non-spatial, so Oracle, SQL Server, geodatabases. Recently, they've made a move into the cloud services. There's 3D data, BIM, and then they also support a lot of point cloud formats and raster. So we're not only restricted just to translation of data, it also specializes in the transformation of data as well. So FME, it allows you to restructure and manipulate the content of the data you're writing. So FME has a library with an excess of 460 transformation tools now in 2015, which you can use to create a data model that you need. So the key thing with Desktop is that it gives you the capability that your output is going to be greater than the sum of your input, because you're building a model that's going to suit your own needs. So like I said, the most common uses of FME today are probably going to be translation, mostly from CAD to GIS formats. We have format and data model integration, so integrating two data formats together, data migration from one application to another, data reprojection, so reprojecting from one coordinate system to another, and then quite important is quality assurance, validation, and cleansing of your data. Everything FME related begins in FME Desktop. So it's made up of two components. You've got your Workbench and your Data Inspector. So you can see here from this graphic, this is the FME Workbench. It is really a simple, intuitive workplace that allows you to define the data that you're reading in over here on the left, the data that you want to write out to over on the right, and how you're going to restructure that data all centered here in the middle. So you're able to create repeatable workflows, which we term as FME workspaces. The Workbench works in conjunction with the Data Inspector. So this is a simple graphical tool, and it allows you to inspect your data's attributes and geometry. So you can see the geometry here in the window view, and then the attributes that relate back to the geometry below. So really, it is a key tool that you use in conjunction with the workspace. It is extremely useful as you can read all of the 325 supported formats within the inspector. So if someone provides you with an AutoCAD file and you're not a CAD user, it can come in really handy because it allows you to open that CAD file, inspect the layers before you begin any transformation or translation of that data set. So it's a key tool to use alongside your Workbench before, during, and after translation. So let's jump into just some desktop demos. So we're going to go through some of the basics capabilities of Desktop. So we jump out. The first thing we're going to go through is some data translation. So translating data from one format to another. And as I said earlier, CAD to GIS is probably one of the most requested data format translations that we are asked to do. So this is something from maybe a DWG to map info or a shapefile. So if we open up our Workbench, and we're going to be using FME 2015, the most recent release. Just give it a second to open up. And there we go. So what we're looking at here is just the start page, and I am going to jump straight in with just a blank workspace. So you can see here you've got your canvas in the middle, and this is where we're going to define our translations. Over on the left, you've got your navigator, and this contains all the information about the data you're reading in, writing out, and all your parameters. Below is your transformation gallery, which I had said before, your 463 possible ways to transform your data are all listed below in this transformation gallery. At the bottom, we've got a log file, history file, and along the top, as you can see, you've got your most commonly used functions in the toolbar, as well as these different drop-down menus. So what I want to do is read in a DWG file and write it out as, we'll say, a map info tab. So it's very easy to start that off. We're going to add a reader, and what you get is this dialog box that pops up. So it's very easy to follow. If it's highlighted in red, means you have to fill it in. So I have to specify the format of my reader. So there's a number of ways I can do that. I can type, and it has this IntelliComplete function that as I type, it's going to restrict the formats to match my text. I can drop down, and I get a list of my most 10 recently used formats, or I can click more formats and browse through the list myself. So to make life easy, I'm going to type DWG. And I'm going to find a DWG file. I'm going to select two files, click open, and I'm going to set it to read individual feature types. So what happens here, because it's a DWG file, it's going to read the different layers of that DWG rather than reading it as one file. It does this because if you click on parameters, you see where it's specified here as layer name. So it's going to read by the different layers such as road, water, rail, and so on. If I was to set it by geometry, then it would read it by point, line, text, arc, and so on. So I'm going to say layer name, individual features, and OK. So you can see the log file starting off straight away. It's reading what I have specified, and it's going to open up with approximately 30 different layers. So I've been asked to specify, are there any layers that I'm not interested in actually reading into my canvas? So I'm going to say things like maybe the zero, legend, maybe the neat line. I'm going to turn them off, so they're not going to be read, but the remaining features are going to become visible in the canvas once I select OK. So you can see here now quite a long list of different layers that were contained within that DWG. The next step then is to specify my writer. So I have my readers. I want to write all that data out to, we'll say, map info tab. There we go. And I want to store my new file that's going to be written into my output folder. And select OK. Now, because I'm just doing a basic translation, I'm not going to define a schema for that data set. I'm just going to specify manual, and I can input that data as I need it. I click OK. What will pop up is my new feature types property for that output data set. So I can give a name to my new map info data. So I'm going to create a new tab file that contains all the DWG information and call it map info data. You can see the schema. I'm going to leave it blank and select OK. So now I have my readers and my single writer. Now I can come in here at this point and start connecting everything, but to make life easier, if I go to my Windows menu and go to feature type connections, I can quickly specify that I want to connect all my different layers to my one destination. And you can see over here on the connection side, I have all my readers connected into my one writer. And if we review that in the canvas, you can see I've got my 30 layers connected into my writer. So at this point, I've made my connection to my reader and writer, and I just click Go. So the translation log file will be performing the translation. It'll all be stored within the log. I can see as it runs away, I'm going to expect one map info tab file to appear. And you can see each of the feature types are being moved from the reader to the writer, and the counts are given on these connections. So you can see the output here is successful, ran in 17 seconds, and I now have one file called map.info.data, which contains 18,000 records. So I can now review this data I've just created in my inspector. So if I right-click and say inspect, it's going to open. And you can see down the bottom, it's just reading in my various layers. What I have is one map info data tab file that contains all the layers of that DWG that I've just specified. So we can zoom in and we can review that information. So that is a really quick and easy way just to translate those two DWG files into one map info tab. We can take it a little bit further, and if you have a different way of that you want to write the data out, you might not want to write it out as one block. You might want to write it out into its individual layers itself. You can come back into your source data. If you look at your format attributes, these are the attributes that relate back to the format we're reading, which is the CAD file. So if we select layer, AutoCAD generally has a format attribute called AutoCAD layer. So I can choose to expose this, or indeed expose the FME base name. If I apply this to all of the different layers and make sure that they're exposed on each individual layer, it'll come up and say, apply the changes to the other 31 layers, yes. You can see what has happened here now is we have two new attributes called AutoCAD layer and FME base name. So this means when I go over to my writer, we scroll down, instead of writing out as a table name called map.info.data, I can set it to write out by the AutoCAD layer. If I click OK, what I'm going to expect to happen here now is instead of creating one file, I'm going to create one tab file for each one of these layers that are available. So it's just a different way of viewing and outputting the data. Let's go to my output. Let me just wait for it to finish. You can see now instead of one file, I have 20 odd features that have been created as tabs. So if I go back in, you'll see all the various tab files, which I can then open up in the inspector. And each one of these layers then are created as separate tab files. So it's just different ways of reading in your data and writing it out. You can write it out as individual layers or as one block. So that's the expose option on your readers and writers. So that's the quick and easy way to do a data translation. We do also have one really important aspect of desktop, and that's data reprojection. So I think it's a fundamental part of FME, and anyone who's a spatial data user in Ireland is going to come across difficulties when dealing with different coordinate systems, whereas you might be viewing your data in ITM, a colleague of yours might be using Irish Grid, and how are you both supposed to use that data in conjunction with each other when you're both in two different coordinate systems? So let's look at the basics of reprojecting data from one coordinate system to another. FME deals with data reprojection really well. So you can see here what I have already in my canvas is a file, and let's inspect it. So this is Ireland. And we have an outline of Ireland in Irish Grid. I can tell this already. So when I select this, you can see over here the coordinate system, Ireland 1965. If I select it, you can see it's referenced to 29903, which is TM75. Also down in the corner here, you can see where it has specified the coordinate system, plus the coordinates, which you can tell by looking at it, are specified as Irish Grid. Now when this data set was read in, if you drop down the parameters for your Ireland Irish Grid map info, you can see you've got a coordinate system parameter. So I have set it to be Ireland 1965. It's also worth noting that you actually don't need to specify your coordinate system if it is a spatial data set that holds that information within it. So FME, it is coordinate system aware. If you have a spatial data set that contains the coordinate system, such as a tab file, shape file. You don't need to set the coordinate system. FME will pick it up. If I run that again with the coordinate system not set, the inspector is going to pop up. And if I click on it it's still going to tell me the coordinate system and it's correct. What we need to do is, if we're going to reproject data out, this is the point where we're going to have to specify a separate coordinate system. So if I leave this coordinate system for the writer as not set, what's going to happen is no reprojection is going to occur. So it's going to just remain as Irish grid. Whereas if I come into the writer coordinate system, and if I drop down and specify it to be ITM or so on, then it's going to reproject just before it writes out the data to the new coordinate system. So the coordinate systems can throw people sometimes, I think, in FME. You can limit them if you're just looking at an Irish data set to Europe. And if you type in the start of Ireland, that usually gives you the list of your relevant coordinate systems. And I think because there's so many here, that's why people start getting confused. ITM is IRNet 95, Irish TM, or it's EPSG 2157. These are just names that FME has specified for the coordinate system. You can see where the group, the date, and the ellipsoid, they actually match. So whether you choose the EPSG 2157 or IRNet 95, you're going to be reprojecting to ITM. So whichever suits you. It's the same with Ireland 1965. You can see by the EPSG number 29903, that's your TM75, 29903, TM75, whereas 29902 is your TM65. So it's just to get your head around the naming convention. I tend to stick with these two, either Ireland 1965 or IRNet 95. I'm going to specify ITM. What's going to happen here is when I write this data out to just a map info file, it's got the exact same attributes, and if I click run, so my inspector is going to open with my original Irish grid data, and what I'm going to do is add in my new file, output and Ireland 90M, select OK. I just expand this view. You can see now I have two data sets, so I'll turn off my Irish grid. And now I've reprojected that data set, and you'll see over here to ITM, and as I hover over, you can see the coordinates down in the right-hand side. So you can see how easy it was to reproject data from one format into another. You do also have the option to reproject data during a translation by using a Reprojection Transformer. So sometimes you might not want to wait till the end of a translation to perform that actual reprojection. You might need to reproject in the middle of a translation in order to merge it with a second data set. And in those instances, you're going to use the reprojector. So if I connect my Irish grid into the reprojector, and I do the same thing, I specify that I want the data to be reprojected to ITM. And we'll just connect an inspector onto this, and we'll define it as something that we will see in the inspector. So we'll say reproject to ITM, and we'll connect up this Dublin bus route. So these Dublin bus routes are already in ITM, so what is going to happen is we're going to take the Irish grid data, reproject it to ITM, and it should be sitting alongside our Dublin bus routes. So we'll hit run. Our inspector just loading up the data. We'll turn off that Irish grid. You can see now I've reprojected my data, and I can view my Dublin bus routes alongside my reprojected format. That means now I have two data sets within the same coordinate system, and I can perform some type of analysis, or I can merge them together if I needed, and I can write out to a new format of a map info file and call it Ireland Transport if I wanted, which would be a merge of both the reprojected Irish grid data plus our Dublin bus routes. So that's our reprojection. It really is dealt with quite well in FME, and if you have any issues with reprojection, don't be afraid to contact us, because I do find a lot of people in Ireland particularly get confused with just the number of options that are available to you for reprojection within FME. Our third quick demo then is going to look at some content restructuring. So those are the real basics, the translation, reprojection, but we can do an awful lot more within Desktop. And we can perform these workflows that we're going to restructure data to output it as a completely different content as the input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read in two separate files, a CSV file and an electoral division shape file. I'm going to take the content of that, perform some spatial analysis on it, and then output a report. So what I'm going to read in first is a CSV, and this is just your fix your street incidents, some public data, and a lot of people might be familiar with this, where the public can come in and specify incidents on their streets, whether it's graffiti, litter, road potholes, and so on. So I have a CSV file of all my incidents in Ireland between a certain year. And because it's a CSV file, that is a non-spatial data format. It's a good idea at this point to come into your parameters. And you can see there's the latitude and longitude actually specified as an attribute. And because of this, I can scroll down and I can actually say that the latitude, and let's get this right, the latitude is the Y coordinate and the longitude is your X. So this means once FME reads this data, it's going to be aware now that these two columns are your latitude and your longitude. And I'm also going to specify that this is the coordinate system LL84, so that's our lat long. And the reason I need to do this is because traditionally CSV is not a spatial data format, so FME is not going to pick up on that information as it would do if it was a shape file or a tab. I'm also going to read in a second data set. We'll go with shape, so SHP. And where is it? Census data. This is just our electoral divisions in 2011. Select OK. And once I open this EDs, you'll see there's a lot of information here that I'm really not interested in. All I want to take is the ED name and possibly the ED county name. So I've restricted the data I'm reading in just to two attributes. And what I want to do is use these two readers. I'm going to merge them together so I can find out how many incidents have occurred within each ED and write a report out for the County Council based on this information. So it's really, I'm taking two separate data sets. The CSV has been provided for by Fix Your Streets, and I'm taking my own electoral divisions. So you see if I start off with my reprojection, and just to view these two formats, because that data set within LL84, I need to reproject it back to Irish Grid because my own EDs are contained within Irish Grid. So we'll hit go. There's quite a lot of records in the CSV. So it reads the CSV first, then it'll read the ED once that's complete. So you can see it's starting to read your electoral division shape. And what we should see now is two data sets sitting on top of each other. And there we go. So there's a lot of records in there, so give it a second to load up. So you've got both your EDs and all your individual points that are recorded from the incidents file. So what I want to do now is use both of these data sets, so my points and my areas, and perform a point on area overlay. So this is just going to merge the attributes based on a spatial relationship. So if that point falls within electoral division, what's going to happen is it's going to take the attributes from that area. So it's going to take the electoral division name and the county name and apply it back to that CSV layer. Next, I'm going to look at a tester, and I'm going to just extract the incidents that fall within Kildare County. So I'm going to limit this to a smaller number of records that fall within Kildare County, and I'm going to perform some statistical analysis then. So I'm going to use the statistics calculator to get a total count of records of incidents within each ED. So you can see here I've used this key group by parameter. So instead of getting a count of all the incidents that have occurred in Kildare, I want a count of all the incidents that occur within each ED within Kildare. So it's going to split up my records based on the electoral division name. Then I'm going to move on to an attribute filter. And these are all the various categories that are available within Fix your street. So graffiti, leaks and drainage, litter and dumping, street lighting, and so on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the road defects and I'm going to create a report maybe for the road department and give them a count of the individual records of the incidents that have been recorded within each ED. I'm going to use another statistics calculator then to get the total road incidents within each ED. So as well as having the total incidents per electoral division, I want the total incidents that are only related to the road category. And then we're going to write it out to a report. So you can see you got this incidents road Kildare. This is just an Excel file. So FME actually deals with Excel very well. So if you have any reports that you need to create from your spatial data sets, you can do so and write that information out to Excel. And what I have here is I've automatically connected the data coming from this duplicate remover into my writer. So I actually am going to go back to manual and I'm going to turn off some of these. I'm going to delete the attributes that the roads department might need, like longitude, latitude, year, council name, and just say they just want to know the county name, the electoral division, and maybe the total incidents that have been reported in the ED and the total road incidents that have been reported in the ED. So I might change those names to something a little bit more relevant to the road department and call them total incidents reported and total road related incidents. Now what happens because I have changed, and we'll zoom in so you can see it a little easier, I've changed those two titles. I will need to map these back to the original because FME no longer knows what matches with which. So I need to say that the total incidents reported is coming from the attributes total incidents ED, and total road incidents is going to total road related incidents. So now you can see everything is green. When I hit run, I have the data taken from my two separate source data running through my analysis process. And what I hope to see at the end then is an output file that I can provide to the road department. And it's going to contain 4 main headings. So you can see total features written, it's given me 59, because there's 59 EDs in Kildare. I'll open it up. And you can see here I've got my county name, ED, total incidents reported, total road related incidents. So then they can perform some sort of analysis here and sort largest to smallest. And we can see that Naas Urban had 133 incidents reported, and 40 of these were related to roads and so on. And you can pick out the EDs which were most incidents have been reported and the most road related incidents. So you can see how I have easily taken 2 separate data sets, ran them through a transformation, and I've come out at the end with completely different format and data that I have defined. So it really is a basic workflow, but it's a good way to give you an indication of how you can use FME to create the type of data that you need and want within your organization. So that's our demos. We'll jump back in. And just if anybody has any questions at this point on any of the workflows that we've done there, or any possibilities that they or capabilities that they want to use within FME, you can say so now. No questions? Well, if you have any in the future, just email them into us at support@imgs.ie and we can deal with them individually. Or if you have any workflows that you want us to help us with, don't hesitate to email us. Also, just to point out that we do have IMGS 2015 user group coming up on the 26th of May in Dundee Golf Club. So you're all invited to attend. We have a business session on in the morning, followed by FME 2015 training in the afternoon. So if you want to join me for some specific 2015 training, sign up with Amanda adonegan@imgs.ie. She can provide you brochures of the content and set you up for registration. And I would also advise you all to join your FME World Tour. We've got 2 dates, the 29th of June in the Ashton Hotel and the 30th of June in Belfast at the Mount Business and Conference Centre. So that's a great way to get to speak to other FME users, both new and advanced, and see what's going on around Ireland for the last year with all the different FME users. So thanks for joining us.
One question just came in there, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Can you explain the scheduling capabilities of workspaces?
For scheduling at different times, yeah, well, we can set batch files to run at particular times, and it is, we'll go back in to our workspace. I can send you on instructions of how to set up a batch file to run your workspace, or another option is FME Server, which allows you to set your workspaces to kick off at different times of the day, the weekend, but you can do it through desktop itself through a batch file that you can set to run at any particular time, whether it's the weekend or afternoons, evenings, so on. So if you can send in your email, I can send you instructions. I have exercises on workspaces of exactly how to do that. So if you just, as a message, put your email address in there, we can forward them on to you after the webinar. Okay? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. Bye.